I brought some help home from work with me today, so I managed to get that last full sheet of plywood up there, and then I had to run inside and help with homework. So right now that last piece is in place and about halfway fastened, and this piece you see sticking off the end here is actually going to go, as I come around, maybe you can see, in that back corner where it's missing. And then I have here in my hand a roll of synthetic underlayment that I'm going to at least temporarily secure to it to provide some waterproofing. I'm going to install a single ply membrane on it, either EPDM or PVC, which both cases mean I'll have to pull this stuff up, but at least this underlayment will keep it watertight for the time being. If I'm feeling really aggressive tonight, I'll fill in that last strip along the top, but even without that strip I can nail the underlayment down and waterproof what I've already installed, which is what I'm really nervous about, the plywood getting wet. So that's what we're up to. I'm going to go up there and fasten the piece that's only halfway done, install the last piece on the second course, and then see what time it is and see whether I paper or complete sheathing. As we start to run out of good light, I've just finished screwing in the completed second course of sheathing. So you can see right here in front of me is the full sheet that I had help this afternoon getting up onto the roof, and there's the last partial sheet. Things weren't quite square. I actually had to rip both sides of that sheet to get it to sit right. But at this late time in the game, it's a treehouse. I'm not going to concern myself with why one of the pieces of sheathing was ever so slightly crooked. So what's left to do on this plane of the roof is to fill in the sheathing along this top section. I could do that now, but I'm just about to run out of good daylight. I probably have just enough to finish the papering. So I'm going to go downstairs, swap out the components of my tool belt, get rid of this cordless drill and these screws, and swap them out for cap nails, and then bring the synthetic underlayment up here and just tack it down. It's going to have to come up before I permanently roof it, but it'll work to keep this temporarily waterproof. Frankly, I could probably leave it for months and it'd be fine. Because the final goal is to install either an EPDM or a PVC single ply membrane directly to this wood, I'm adhering the sheathing with these Timbermate screws. If I were to use nails to put down the sheathing, what happens over time is, due to movement between the plywood and the rafters, the nail heads slowly rise. And when you're adhering a single ply membrane directly to the wood, those nail heads rising up underneath the membrane can actually cause damage to the membrane over years. So it's just something I've learned in roofing, is if you're going to, whatever the substrate you adhere to, you screw that substrate in. If we were putting insulation over this, it would be okay to nail the plywood and screw the insulation down, but since all I'm doing is the plywood, I'm screwing it down. Now, this is a 2.5 inch Timbermate, and this is one of the old school Timbermates that has a combination square drive number 2 Phillips. And I love these screws because you can use just a standard number 2 Phillips and they drive perfectly with no stripping. This is what I've switched to, because for the first course I was using the more modern Timbermate screws, which are a star drive. And there's nothing wrong with the star drive per se, but I just find it doesn't sit as nicely as this square drive, the bit in the screw. I like square drive. But the real reason I switched, frankly, was because the ones for the first course were only 1 5/8". And what I was finding was that the threads were stripping out from the 2x4 before it seated the head flush with the surface of the plywood. So by going with this longer screw, this 2.5 inch screw, it's got a lot more bite on the thread, and I get these to seat perfectly. The light is really screwing with this camera, but you can see there how that's seated nice and flush. This is seated nice and flush, and that's just done with a 12-volt cordless screw gun. It's this Milwaukee M12. It's got the big battery pack on it, but it's just a 12-volt screw gun. It's not even a drill. It is literally just a screw gun. It only does 500 RPMs. And it's done a fine job with them. It's countersinks them no problem, and they bite fine. So that's the sheathing up to this point. Now I'm going to go and get the paper. As we run out of light, I think this video is going to be terrible, so I'll probably just narrate. As we run out of light, I've run out of underlayment. It's probably very hard to see here, but the difference from there to there is where the underlayment ends and then where the plywood ends. So I'm going to go inside and see if I can grab some more underlayment. Hopefully I have something else in the lighting's a bit better in here. I'm in my garden storage shed. Here's my supply of various underlayments. We've got regular tar paper here, geotextile fabric, otherwise known as weed barrier. This is an empty box of clear poly, rosin paper, more regular felt, an actual box of poly, and finally here we have deck armor, which is a synthetic underlayment that is, you know, if the other synthetic underlayment wasn't overkill, this stuff certainly is. This stuff is a breathable synthetic underlayment. There are many different opinions on how well you need your roof to breathe and vent, and I'm kind of on the sealed envelope side of this story. But regardless, because regular felt paper, such as that roll there or this roll here, it has a tendency to tear. So it really can't be left exposed. If you've ever shingled a roof, you know that you need to install shingles immediately on top of it. So I can't use that. So I'm going to have to use this synthetic underlayment, the deck. Finally back to it on the treehouse. Here you can see the last two pieces of sheathing. There is a joint right here. To make these two pieces a few days ago, I came out and I measured from this joint here to the ends of these rafters and gave myself a 3/4 inch projection to cover the fascia when it gets installed. You can see this piece basically covers this big flying soffit that's at the top of the upper roof. Since I had the measurements for these pieces, I cut them down in the driveway on my workbench. Used the track saw and zip, they were done. So now I've got them up here. They fit pretty well. Not a perfect fit. Come down to this side, you see we've got, what's that, about 1/4 inch, something like that. I've decided that's good enough for government work, and I'm not going to worry about it. It is a treehouse. The metal edge will cover that, and if I ever have to, I can trim it back when I do the roof. So they fit well enough. Now I'm going to work on getting them attached, and then we'll jump to the lower roof. It appears I have enough plywood for the lower roof, but it's going to be very close, and it wouldn't surprise me if I, in fact, don't have enough plywood for the lower roof. So we'll get the upper roof down, we'll get the paper over it, get the upper roof set, and then worry about the lower roof. I'm using screws to put it down because I think I may have mentioned this in a previous video, but I'm going to be gluing a single ply roof directly to this plywood. And what we've experienced at work doing roofing is that if you use nails to put in the sheathing, over time the nail heads do rise up. Now if you're laying insulation over it and then a single ply roof, that's fine. If you're going with actually an asphalt roof, you have the same issues. You need the insulation underneath it. But when you're adhering the roof membrane directly to the board, to the sheathing, you want to use screws because this won't back out over time and won't be able to ever puncture the roof from the underside. So it's probably a little overkill in terms of attachment, but it means I don't have to go with some additional form of sheathing here before I put the roof membrane down. It'll let me adhere the roof membrane right to the plywood. Haven't gotten too much time in the treehouse this weekend. Yesterday, didn't get to the shop till it was past dark, so I spent the night in the shop working on some stuff for Woodworking in America Midwest. I know all the kids are having fun out in Pasadena this weekend, and we plan on making them jealous that they skipped out in Cincinnati in a couple weeks. But regardless, today I got a little bit of time this afternoon, and I managed to pick up the missing sheet of plywood on Friday, so I had all the material, broke out the track saw, zip, and cut the pieces to fit. So here we are looking at the sheathing on the lower roof. I'm hanging off one end. Ladders here, and with the soffit, it's a little awkward, so excuse the limited view. But here we have the sheathing on the lower roof. As with the upper roof, I used screws rather than nails. With the upper roof, that was really important because installing a single ply roof membrane, nail heads will back out. So by using screws, you can adhere the single ply roof membrane right to the sheathing. Down here, I plan to slate this actually. So I guess I'm not really in danger of these fasteners, these nail heads coming up, but I figured what the hell, the screws just lock it all together. It's not that big an area. I put it all in with a 12-volt impact gun, so it wasn't hard to screw in. So here we have the sheathing. What I'm going to do right now is bust out a roll of underlayment. I have that roll of GAF deck armor, I believe it's called. It's the GAF, super high-end, breathable underlayment. I happen to have a roll kicking around the house. This is the second house the roll's been to. I'm not a big believer in breathable underlayment. I think if you vent properly or don't vent properly, you're okay. But I have it. It's good stuff. I'm going to use it. In a case like this, all I would recommend if somebody else is doing something like this, use some sort of synthetic underlayment unless you intend to shingle or slate or put your permanent roof on right away. Because a natural felt paper, like you typically see under a shingle roof, tears very easily and will not last up here. So if you do sheathe paper the same day you sheathe, you don't want the sheathing to get wet, and use a synthetic underlayment, which I have seen in practice left exposed and stay watertight for up to 18 months. So once you use the synthetic underlayment, no matter which brand it is, you're going to be nice and protected, and you can take your time roofing. Because once I get this watertight, by papering it, it's my intention to start moving to this clear story wall and these walls down here and start doing some sheathing and closing in the envelope. And I'm not going to return to the roof until everything else is done. Because once I get it papered in, it's watertight and I can move on. At this point now, it's all about closing in the envelope. That's where we are now. Probably get another couple of shots in a minute once I get it papered in. Okay, the papering, the lower roof is done. I nailed the hell out of the deck armor with plastic cap nails. Here's a close-up of plastic cap nails in the upper roof. You use the plastic cap nails because it gets a better bite and the plastic is dull. If you use a metal cap nail, you have the potential to tear. All synthetic underlayments, deck armor and others, are very resistant to tearing unless you have a very sharp edge. So something like staples, regular roofing nails you shouldn't use because the edge will cut it. But the plastic cap nails have great holding power, and as I said before, I've seen synthetic underlayment held down with plastic cap nails act as the only roof for 18 months without issue. Manufacturers don't say you should leave it that long, but I'll tell you in practice it does work. So, in any case, here we go. The deck armor comes in 4-foot wide rolls. This lower roof is only just a touch over 3 foot, so we got plenty of sheeting running up the wall and plenty of overlap down at the eave. I've nailed the hell out of it. I'm going to leave it like this, and as I said, it'll stay like this for a while until I get the walls closed in. But at this point now, the roof is sheathed and papered in, and next up, it'll be the walls.